Hi, folks. This is Jesse Randall, Director of MSU's Forest Biomass Innovation Center up here outside of Escanaba. Today's focus will be on non-timber forest products, and this is a part of a series that we're doing across several non-timber forest products. Today we're going to focus on American ginseng and how it's produced here in Michigan and across the range of production states. We really need to focus our attention on the American ginseng because it is becoming rare. Pretty much the Asian ginseng has been extirpated through overharvest, and now that is beginning to happen to our American ginseng. We're not really going to focus on the Siberian or the Brazilian or the Indian ginsengs, mainly because they are not, or they don't have the ginsenosides, the compounds that the American and the Asian ginsengs have. And so if you're looking to enter the production market for ginseng, we're only talking about American ginseng right now. And so you need to know what you are asking for when you buy seed, and we'll talk about that. But today, let's just talk about American ginseng. So this plant is a perennial herbaceous, and it's a very long-lived plant. Out in nature, you know, they routinely find where wild harvest is allowed plants that are 50, 60, 70 years old. These are a plant that regrows from its root structure every year. It has an annual stem, and that stem has compound leaves. And given its name, quinquefolius, it has 5 leaflets coming off of stalks. And in the ginseng world, those are called prongs. And so the older the plant, normally the more prongs it has, up to about 4 or 5 prongs. There's always a central flower spike. Normally those flower spikes, and you see it here on the right-hand side picture, those red berries are formed after it has flowered, and those are the fruiting bodies that have the seeds. So that flower spike and seeds, normally by the 3rd or 4th year, it will begin to have some small flower and seed production. And as it gets older, it has more and more seeding capacity. So it is native to eastern North America, out to the western edges of Iowa, back up into Minnesota, as far down and touching into Louisiana. You normally, when you think of American ginseng, it's kind of along that Appalachian region, down through the Ozarks, and we see that where we sit now in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, there isn't a large distribution of American ginseng that is native in its range. I can tell you that it is here. It's throughout much of it. A lot of it has been planted. The seed has been moved around over the years. There seems to be no limits or laws regarding the movement or interstate movement of seed. And so you'll find genetic strains from the Ozarks growing up here. You'll find Appalachian. You'll find Ontario up into Quebec. And so people have moved around a lot of seed. And so calling it the native distribution is kind of where it was historically. Today, those seed lots, the genotypes, have really been moved around. So let's talk about the year in sort of what a ginseng goes through. So here, the flowers of an adult or a maturing plant will form late May into June. And if it's pollinated and has a good growing season, those seeds will ripen and begin to turn red in August, mid to late August. And in every one of those little red berries, you're going to have anywhere from 1 to 3 seeds, and they're a really unique looking seed. And their life history traits show us that they need to stratify for anywhere from 18 to 22 months. And so that means Those seeds that are produced and are ripe by the fall of one year will lay dormant in the soil litter layer. They'll go over winters for that first winter. They'll go through an entire warm stratification the next summer. They'll go through another winter stratification before they're capable of germinating. Now, before they germinate, it's commonly referred to as or germinated seed or stratified seed will smile at you. The hard seed coat will crack open, exposing the light internal seed where your root radical will form from. And so, when you're buying stratified seed, you really want to look for that smiling seed.
So let's talk a little bit about plant development and prong development.
And you can see in that picture, we run the gamut of 1-year seedlings up to a 4-prong plant that's on the right side that is probably anywhere from 10 to 11 years old. And all of this depends a little bit about your growing conditions, how fast that plant will mature, how productive the soils are, what light levels it's at, and the whole 9 yards. But you can see that that first year plant on the left side of that picture looks a lot like a young strawberry. These plants are incredibly delicate, and in doing the pathology research behind it, a lot of them at this stage are going to die from dampening off fungi. Slugs will come in and feed on them, and so ginseng as first year and second year plants are not that hardy. You're going to lose a large percentage of what you put out there that germinate to disease. It's just a function of this plant. It seems as they get older, they're a little bit hardier to stand up against some of the diseases. By the time they're 3 to 6 years old, you'll have the 2-prong plants, and that's that second jar. And if you can see my cursor, I'm pointing to a 2-prong plant. So those 2 prongs are holding up 5 leaflets each. By the time we're a little older, by 7 to 9 years into the planting, they'll have a 3-prong plant, and that is right here on that third jar from the left. And still no seed really stalk present on this one. It's not to say it isn't going to happen, but your real seed production begins when those plants get to that 10 and 11-year-old stage or the 4-prong stage. And again, depending on your site productivity, you might reach seed productivity by 4 or 5 years. Starting as a 2-prong or a 3-prong plant might have a few limited seeds. But the older the plant, the more likely you are to have those seed stalks. And you can see those green seeds that are maturing. So this was in the middle of the summer. You can see the root down in here and the stalk that is born off of it. So how do you age ginseng? Every time that it grows a new aerial shoot, so a new above ground shoot, there's always one waiting and forming down below for the next year. And every time that shoot that grows above ground that year, it lays down a bundle scar. And you can see here is the root on the bottom, the root collar, and every year it lays a bundle scar. So the first year, it laid down some scars. The second year, there was a scar. Third year, fourth year, fifth year. And you can kind of judge how well the plant grew. Some of that is the conditions it's under. Some of that is the form it was growing with. And so this is how, when you're in a state that allows wild harvesting of ginseng, a lot of times those states will have a mandated age. And so when you dig up your ginseng, you count those bundle scars, and if it doesn't reach the minimum age for harvesting, you have to replant that plant. And you don't want to be caught with something that's younger than what's allowed. Now, in a state like Michigan, wild harvest is banned. It is a protected plant. So only ginseng that has been grown and cultivated with certain techniques, which we'll talk about here in a few slides, can be harvested. So there is no wild harvesting of ginseng in the state of Michigan. And so you'll know how old your ginseng is in each one of your planting beds because you will have planted it, you will have documented it. But if you are out there in a state that allows wild harvest, You'll need to learn how to identify those bundle scars in the field and properly replant that plant if it's not old enough. So, what are the conditions that are preferred by American ginseng? Well, the reason we're bringing you this talk is because here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, we really see a lot of the preferred conditions. We have millions of acres of hardwood forests, sugar maple dominated. We have the slope that it wants. It likes good drainage, good air drainage, and water drainage. So north and east slopes are normally cooler and wetter, and that stands across the region. You're looking at something with about a 5 to 20% grade slope to it. Again, that's going to facilitate air drainage and moisture drainage. You're looking for a fairly closed canopy. You're looking for something with 75% shade or more. This plant does not like to grow out in the open. It's sensitive to the sunlight, so it really is a dense understory plant. It likes to stay cool, likes to stay moist, and that's why the Upper Peninsula is prime for raising American ginseng. So they like loamy to sandy loamy soils. Again, because they are fairly delicate in their disease tolerance, we want to have a well-drained, productive soil. It likes high organic matter, and it's got a fairly generous range of soil pH, so it fits well across the Upper Peninsula. We also have calcareous limestone parent material under parts of the UP. This plant seems to really like a lot of calcium and phosphorus. And so as we go into the production side of things, before you really invest heavily, you want to do a soils test. And you're going to do that soils test every 2 to 3 years to maintain those preferred micro and macronutrients that this plant really wants. So what are we going to look for overstory indicators of where it's good to site a bed of American ginseng? Well, the first one is the sugar maple basswood, which we have millions of acres here. If you're not in that sugar maple dominated forest, you could look for black walnut, you can look for red elm, you can look for red oak. We've found it under all of those plants across the Midwest. So when I'm in the understory, what am I looking for in terms of what's really going to key in on where American ginseng either is if I'm harvesting wild or if I'm going to be planting? I really like to use baneberry, white baneberry, and blue cohosh. It seems like those plants are indicators of very rich sites that are well drained, that have the right levels of shade to them. Sometimes maidenhair fern we'll use, but that can be found in spots where you normally don't find a lot of ginseng. But blue cohosh and white baneberry, really good indicators, at least that I have found. Up here, we also can look for jack in the pulpit. We can look for golden seal, some of those other plants. Trillium is a harder indicator for us to find up here because of the deer densities that we have. And deer really prefer to eat wild trillium. I'm also going to look for bloodroot. That's another indicator of a well suited site. You have to be a little careful on the bloodroot. Sometimes you'll find bloodroot in areas that are possibly too moist or not well drained enough in the below ground soils for American ginseng. So let's talk a little bit about woods cultivated ginseng. And every state and agency calls it just slightly different, but what I'm calling woods cultivated ginseng is you're using the overstory as natural shade. You have forest soils that don't go through a lot of amendments, and you're growing American ginseng with woods cultivation on raised beds, all right? And so you're going to run a tiller through there. You're going to mound these sites up. That helps with drainage. It helps with incorporation if you do need some calcium or some phosphorus. And you really, because you till the soil, you kind of destroy the natural soil processes, or you destroy the structure of that soil. And so you have to be careful. The ginseng coming out of it, yes, you can get a faster turnaround, 6 to 9 year rotations there, but sometimes buyers will not see the physical structure of the root uh, that they want. Ginseng is bought on age, it's bought on ginsenoside compounds, but it's also bought on looks. And so you need to be very careful when you cultivate the beds that you don't completely destroy the structure, that the plant has to fight its way through the soils. All right, and when we talk about, if you're looking at how to get into this and if you're going to raise an acre of this stuff, I've put kind of average numbers, and you have to be very careful with the literature you read out there, because the numbers seem pretty high. And if the back of the envelope calculation doesn't kind of work out, don't be surprised that their numbers are a little bit inflated. But these are kind of a rough average numbers in terms of how many pounds of seed you will need at the higher end of the density, so about 48 pounds of live seed per acre of bed. So that's very important. It's per acre of bed space, not per acre of ground that you have. You're looking at a production yield of about 600 pounds of root per acre. But again, because it is grown in cultivated beds, the pounds or the dollar per pound that the buyers will give you is normally less. You're in that 150 to 250 range. Now, those dollar values, don't take those as gospel. They change by location. They change if a buyer has an outlet for it. Changes by the year depending on how the supply and demand goes. The one thing we do need to talk about is ginseng, like those American trilliums, are really preferred by deer. Okay, and so you're going to have to, if you're in a high deer density area, you're going to have to fence the deer out, and that just is a farm expense that you're going to have up front. You build your fence the first time, and then you'll have it for several rotations down through the years. Here in Michigan, we do have licensing requirements. Because wild ginseng is no longer allowed, so only raised ginseng can be sold. And so on August 15th of every year, on the years that you're actually going to sell ginseng, you need to call the state ginseng coordinator. You need to buy yourself a $25 harvester license, and they will come out to your ginseng farm, and they will certify that, yes, this is in fact farm-raised ginseng. And so when I called and asked, do I need a license for every year that I am farming it or just the years I am going to harvest? And they said, as long as you keep good records and you have where you got your ginseng seed, when it was planted, what you did for cultural methods, if you did some fungicides or if you weeded it, if you thinned out the beds, all of that has to be documented in a log, and they'll look at that log and say, yes, you are raising ginseng. This is not wild, and they will give you the license and allow you to then sell and enter the ginseng market. And so only the year you're going to harvest do you need to call the state ginseng coordinator. But I would encourage you to start the relationship with the licensing coordinator to know exactly what they're going to look for in your logbook, so you know you're in compliance from day one. They're really great folks, and they'll work through the schedule. But when you start raising ginseng, you're 6 to 10 to 12 years out of having a harvested crop, and so this is one of those longer term investments that you're going to have farm expenses against for the first 10 to 12 years before you ever realize a harvest. So get to know them now and begin the process. So wild simulated, or what I call wild simulated. So again, we're using the natural shade of our existing forest, and we're going to use the forest soils as they are. We're going to keep them intact. And what you need to do is you need to pull away the leaf litter. You will do no tillage to the soil. So we're not destroying the soil structure there. You're going to add about 20 pounds of active seed per acre, and it's just going to be broadcast out on those bare mineral soil beds, if we call them beds. You're going to just lightly walk them in so you have good soil to seed contact, and then you're going to put the leaf litter back over top of it and you're going to walk away, other than putting a deer fence on it. So you can see that we've more than or we've cut our seeding rates by more than half versus the cultivated beds and the raised beds. So what we're doing here is we're trying to simulate how it would grow in nature. It's much more sparse. We have a little bit more airflow around each plant. We have less likely to form complete dense monocultures that will require higher inputs of fungicides and chemical controls. But what you get on the flip side is a much lower root production per acre. So pounds of production per acre is a lot lower, but it's going to be worth to the buyer a lot more in the dollars per pound range. And so your payoff will come when you get a premium price per pound of the wild simulated ginseng. Now, you still have to worry about dampening off fungi. You still have to worry about slugs. You still have to worry about deer. But again, you're creating a plant that from the outside physically looks like more of the wild cultivated plant. The more cultivation you do to the soil and in the raised beds and in the farm fields, that forms more like a carrot root, and so it doesn't have the shape that they're looking for, and it has lower ginsenoside compounds the more you cultivate. So I prefer to use the wild simulated. It's a lower input cost and a little bit longer in terms of the rotation year, but you build that into your business model. Again, this falls under the same need to call the ginseng coordinator to get a license in the year that you're going to harvest. So let's talk about wild ginseng. And the reason I have this up here, the picture on the right-hand side, really shows what ginseng should look like. And to the buyers, they want to see something that resembles the name, or man root. Two arms, two legs, a head, and all those fine little rootlets, all right? But again, you're looking at a plant that can run anywhere from $600 to $1,000 a pound. And that's why it's become so rare now in its native range, because of the wild harvest and because of the price and the demand placed. The vast majority of all ginseng goes overseas into a foreign market. And so with the pressures of that wild harvest comes now a ban in Michigan. So let's talk a little bit about seeds. Again, we talked about that 18 to 22 months of seed stratification. You can buy seed commercially. It's available. You want to know who you're buying from, and when you find seed that works for you, that shows up on time, that is in good shape, you want to keep those relationships positive, and you want to let that buyer of the seed know that, or the seller of the seed know that the seed worked out well and you appreciate it. You're going to look at a late fall planting or a very early spring planting. And a lot of that depends on when they have their stratified seed available for sale. And again, no more than a ½ inch deep in the mineral soil. A lot of times I will broadcast that seed with a calibrated spinner. You can use those grass seed spinners to spin it on. And a lot of it depends on what type of planting, if you're doing the raised beds or if you're doing the wild simulated. You're looking at, and this is where the literature varies, anywhere from 4,000 to 6,500 seeds per pound. And again, a good dealer of ginseng seed is going to have float tested their seed, which means the float seed or the seed that floats is no good, and they will have discarded that. If you find that you're getting a germination percentage that's very low, that could be that buyer or the seller of your ginseng seed did not float test it. And some years are worse than others. Some years seeds just are not that viable. It's how it was handled. It was how it was shipped. Seeds are a perishable commodity, and so you have to handle them well. You can't let them warm up. You can't let them spoil. And there are some diseases that are arriving on the seed, and so you want to know if the buyer or the seller, of that seed has treated the seed. Have they sterilized the outer coat? Have they treated it with a fungicide before planting? All those things need to be asked before you buy that seed. You're looking at a cost of around $125 to $140 per pound if you're going to be buying seed. So you can see after 4 to 5 years of your own production, if your plants come into production and you harvest your own seed, you want to document that, again, for the licensing side of things. But then you can save yourself the input costs by going out and harvesting your own seed and then going through the defleshing, the debulping, and the stratification, which we'll talk about in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about fertilizers. So you're going to want to, like everything in farming, test your soils every 2 to 3 years. And you're looking at needing to add calcium and looking for pHs, 4, 5 to 7 range. And you're going to adjust your pHs if you need to. And you're going to bring it up when it's low and you're going to bring it down when it's high. So you also, a standard soil test should give you the needed measurements to adjust your fields. So planting beds. These are kind of a raised bed just prior to planting. This is more of a small demonstration, not a commercial size. You're looking at having, and again, use the equipment that you have. If you have a rear tine rototiller that can cultivate a bed and mound it up, that's 6 to 9 inches off the ground, sloping. That provides good water drainage, good air drainage. And you're going to plant those seeds. You can either hand plant within rows in there, about a foot apart, or you can broadcast and then just mulch over top, and what grows will grow. So you have a couple different ideas. If you're going to plant, I would at least put a 1/4 inch of soil over top of those rows. You can grid them out. That kind of, by gridding the planting out, you have a rough idea of what your germination will be after it comes up, and you can adjust future plantings based on that. You're looking at needing at least 1 to 3 inches of forest leaf litter and mulch on top of that. And so you're going to have to, once you've cleared the site and made the mounds and planted, you'll have to put mulch back on. So there is some labor involved with this. And so I tell everybody, start out small and let your business opportunity grow as your education level grows in American ginseng. Harvesting, that's one of those things you've waited 9 years, up to 12 years or 15 years to harvest. And that can be a daunting task. It's labor intensive. You have to go slow. This is not something that you can rush. So normally ginseng is dug in the fall, so September, October. And you're going to loosen the soil all the way around the plant. That's why planting into heavy clay is not really very good. One, that heavy clay will hold moisture and create fungal problems, but also harvesting is going to be really hard because the buyers want to see the fine root hairs attached. They want you to take the time to really dig and extricate that plant. And it's going to, again, you follow the rules for your state. Every state does it a little bit differently. Some states have a harvest window of a month or two that is only allowed to be harvested. Other states, you harvest normally in the fall after the growing season, but they don't put strict dates there. So know your local state ginseng rules. So here, before you get into how to prepare your ginseng for sale, you really want to talk to several different buyers. And it used to be that you want to dry your ginseng down, and they wanted dry ginseng. Some buyers now have switched over to wanting to be able to control the conditions at which you dry and clean that root, and so they will buy fresh dug ginseng. So really, before you go through the labors of washing and drying, you want to talk to your local buyers and figure out what they're looking for that year. And it can change by the year, so always have a conversation with them ahead of time. So if they do want you to wash it, you rinse it off. You don't let that plant soak or that root soak in water. You don't want to scrub those roots perfectly clean, because when they first come out of the soil, they're like a newly dug potato or carrot. The skin on them is very soft and gentle, and you can, if you scrub too hard, wipe that skin right off. And then they are not going to bring the high value that you want. And it's okay if you don't remove all of the soil. A little bit of soil is okay. It shows that you really did not try to scrub these things off. You're not going to get it all. Don't even try to get it all. So let's talk about drying. Low and slow. So you need a good air movement that has a stable humidity. So you don't want it to go up and down in terms of humidity throughout the day or across the week. You want to dry this slow. The slower the drying, the better you are. So they have these screened racks in a fairly climate controlled room with good air circulation. They've got a 20-inch box fan underneath it, blowing, across those roots. And I would every day go in and take the top rack and move it to the bottom and move everything up one. That means you're in there and you're managing it. You can pick out any of the rotten roots, and you just have to realize some of the plants that you dig before they dry will begin to spoil. Get those out of there as soon as possible. You really don't want a lot of the plant roots to be touching each other, just in case. It'll help air movement around it. And, if you have one that spoils and it's touching another one, it can spread those pathogens and begin the spoilage on a good root. So low and slow, but again, ask your individual buyers what they're looking for. So just remember, when you dry things, they're going to shrink. They're going to lose at least a third of the green weight. Or it will be about a third of the green weight, let's say that. But it can be more or it can be less depending on the moisture level that you take it to. And so when you dry them, it's a lot like, drying fruit and vegetables. You want them to break cleanly and crisp. You don't want it to tear and be bendable at all. That is not dry enough if your buyer wants dry ginseng. And if it bends and not breaks crisply, there's more likely a chance that once you bag it up, it will begin to spoil. So let's talk about a little bit of the production of seed. We know that by August, late August, those seeds will have turned red. And you got a window to get out there and collect those seeds once they've turned red, or before they fall, or before birds eat them, or before the deer eat them. Like all seed production, that for seed storage and replanting, you want to let them go through a fermentation and a depulping process. And so what you can do is you can pick those, you can kind of mash them in your hands, you can macerate them a little bit, and put just a little bit of water in there if through the depulping it hasn't already given you a lot of moisture. Let them sit for a few days, and they will begin the fermentation process. And part of that fermentation process is the breakdown of that fleshy pulp. And it makes washing that pulp off that much easier, because you really just want to get at the seeds inside. You want them clean. And then what you can do is you need clean sand. And a lot of times I'll take a window screen or window screening that you can buy at the box store, and you make yourself a chamber, and you lay sand down, clean sand in there, lay a layer of seed, lay a layer of sand, and you keep going back and forth between the sand and the seed. And what that is doing then is creating these seed strata beds, and you tie it up into a bundle, and you can either bury it in the ground, put it 3-4 inches below ground, put a marker there so you know where it's at. The reason I like to use window screen is it's less likely that rodents will come in and try to dig it up, or try to bury in there to get at those seeds. So you have to protect it, and because it's going to be there for up to 18 to 22 months in that screened in bag or those boxes buried in the ground. Very rarely will we try to do forced stratification in a root cellar. I think the freezing and thawing action of Mother Nature works a lot better, but that's not to say that you can't mimic some of those low temperatures and higher moistures. But I think there is something to being exposed to the native biota in the soil. So there's a lot of production guides out there. When I was at Iowa State University, we created a series of publications, and they're still available online. And we're going to be bringing those over to Michigan State University. We're going to be updating those with new photos and new guidelines. Our information is really undergoing a transformation with the interest in American ginseng. And I would encourage you, if you can get a hold of a copy of Bob Bifus's book. Bob was with Cornell University for a long time and really has put together a nice practical guide to growing ginseng. That is a really good book to use and to get your hands on. But there's a lot of information out there. I would encourage you to get a hold of it before you start the endeavor.
So this just gives you an idea of on the Iowa State University Forestry Extension website where those publications are for the time being until they go through a revamped website, and then we'll have to all learn together where it's at. But you can find them under new publications or all publications, and they're listed in there. And it's an F series, so F400 through F403 is all about the ginseng ecology, growing, disease, pests, and regulations. So with that said, the F403 is ginseng regulations as it pertains to growing and harvesting in Iowa. So be very careful using that publication if you're outside the state of Iowa. When in doubt, give me a call. You have my number at the bottom of the screen, and I'd love to talk to you about it. If you're raising ginseng and you have some problems, you're welcome to send me photos at the email below and questions as to what's going on, and we'd love to help you. You can find us on YouTube and on Twitter. I'd encourage you all to follow us there because we will have demonstrations and some research ongoing here at the Michigan State University Forest Biomass Innovation Center over the next several years. We're looking to do some demonstrations and some education and some research on ginseng. With that, have a great day. Look forward to talking to you.